So this is a good old saw. Nate got this used 8 years ago or so. It had very few miles on it. I'm talking to you about this saw because even though I use a Mag 77 now and have for the last 15 years, for the 25 years before that I used one very similar to this. Like very similar to this. And I love them. There's still a soft spot in my heart for that gray handle. There's even a soft spot in my heart for the metal handle. The really only fundamental difference between this old campaigner and the new Mag 77s is the fact that the Mag 77s are made primarily out of magnesium instead of out of aluminum and steel and plastic. And so the net result is this is heavier. That's a heavier saw. Now, it didn't used to feel heavier because I didn't have anything to compare it to that was lighter, but it does now. I think, wow, that's heavy. And if you think about this objectively for a second, you'll realize that that only really makes a difference to a pro, because the pro's got to use it all day. And the pro has to cut out of position. I mean, you're cutting overhead and you're hanging out over the edge of the roof, and sometimes you have to use it upside down, and there's just a wide sort of an infinite number of ways that you might have to use this thing, and so a few pounds makes a big difference. But if you're a do-it-yourselfer or somebody who's just getting into carpentry and the dollars are hard to come by, and since you don't earn a big paycheck every single week using these things, it's nice to think about saving some money, you could do worse. Besides the fact that it's a bargain, and besides the fact that it will cut anything you want to cut, there's an element of safety around having a saw that's a little heavier. The primary way that people get hurt with Skil saws is with kickback. The power of the thing binding in the wood kicks it back into your lap. A heavier saw has more inertia. It's going to resist that kickback, and if it does come back at you, it's going to be coming back slower than those saws that are so light and so fast and so powerful. I'm from Oregon. We had a superstar runner there about 30 years ago, Steve Prefontaine. That guy grew up over on the Oregon coast, and he trained in tennis shoes, like Converse tennis shoes, running up and down sand dunes, because it's hard to run in sand. So let me stretch this metaphor just a little farther and say, if you grow up as a carpenter using this thing, and then at some point when the production becomes more important to you, you drop back to a Mag 77, I think it's going to feel like it's made of helium. It's going to feel so light. You're going to develop some arm strength. Do you care about that? You should care about that. If you're going to become a professional carpenter, you've got to grow some guns, man, or you're never going to produce the work that the guy next to you who did some heavy work grew. He's going to be hard to keep up with. And you don't want to make the mistake of arm wrestling at break time. So you've got the thing about building some arm strength, getting used to a tool that is going to prepare you for an increase in productivity when you're ready to make that increase in productivity. You've got the piece about a smaller margin of safety at kickback time. I don't think these things are imaginary, but the bottom line is it's going to do the work and you can buy it for less money. Now, when you're looking at the saw to buy it, you got to evaluate a few things. If you can't tip that bevel lock open and have it rotate easily to full 45 degrees, or at least if you drop this down, see, hear that? It just falls clear to the open position. That means your table's bent. Keep looking until you find another one. If you look back around the brushes and look in the armature and you see a bunch of concrete dust sucked in there, it's because it belonged to a block mason. And he's been cutting block with this, with a diamond blade, and it's pulled that dust down into the bearings and the armature, and the old boy's hurt. Pass on it. Look for one that looks like this, kind of clean, not a big bunch of dents and dings. The depth gauge works seamlessly. And when you plug it in, have a good hold of it. Watch a couple videos about how to use a Skil saw without removing portions of your body, and enjoy the feeling of working with a professional's tool, learning to do professional work. Our culture is falling into a bad habit, and that is of only thinking of the latest and greatest as being the one that we should own. You know, that is nonsense. There's plenty of examples of things that are not fundamentally improved when they're improved, but merely look a little flashier and the price went up. Now, this is not quite that. This is not cutting edge anymore. This is a generation back. But boy, it's a good tool. So when you're thinking about, you know, holding out for something that you can brag about when you get to work and you get out of the truck and people say, wow, let me see that. I've been wondering what those are like. Shine that for a while. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say this tool, which was made in the USA, out of real metal, with bearings and bushings and splines that AVE himself couldn't be overly critical of, and that guy knows how to examine a tool. I would go out on a limb and say that this brand of saw has built more single-family residences in the United States than any other. That's a pretty good recommendation. If it's good enough for all the people that own those houses, darn it, it ought to be good enough for you. So if you're going to do a pro's work, don't be afraid to buy a pro's tool, even if it's not got all of the whistles and all of the bells.